All right, if you would take your Bibles and turn with me to, if you have one, to Matthew chapter 1. We're going to read a few verses from Matthew 1. This morning we continue our series on the 5 extraordinary women in the genealogy of Jesus. And the last 2 weeks we've covered 2 of them. Anyone know who we've covered so far? Do you remember? Anyone? What's that? We've covered Rahab. That was last week. And 2 weeks ago? Tamar. And today we're going to cover Ruth. Go ahead and put that up for you. And next week we cover Bathsheba. And then on Christmas Eve, we close out this series and we talk about Mary, the mother of Jesus. These are all 5 of the women who are in the genealogy of Jesus in Matthew's gospel. So if you're able and willing, I would invite you to stand with me in honor of God's word as I read aloud and you read silently from a few verses from Matthew chapter 1. Chapter 1, verse 1. A record of the genealogy of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. Abraham was the father of Isaac, Isaac the father of Jacob, Jacob the father of Judah and his brothers. Now verse 5. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of King David. Let's pray. Father, as we look at the story of Ruth today, Father, help us to understand what real loyalty looks like, what it means to truly love the vulnerable as you do, and be clear with us about what specifically you're inviting us into as a response to these words, because we want to obey you. And we pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. You may be seated. Thank you. So there are only a couple of women that have books of the Bible named after them. One is Ruth. We find her story in Ruth, which is 4 chapters. We've actually covered it during Advent before, and we're going to cover it next year during Advent. It's a great story, 4 chapters. I could have read all of Ruth to you today, but that would have taken a while. So we're just going to skip around in the book of Ruth. And the other woman who has a book named after her is Esther. Yeah, Esther also has a book named after her. Interestingly enough, Ruth is not the main character in the book that bears her name. Now, she is the female human heroine. There's a male hero named Boaz. The main hero of any book of the Bible is always the same. That's who? God. God's the real hero in the Bible. But the book of Ruth is not about Ruth. If you weren't here in the first service, anyone know who the book of Ruth is really about? It's about Naomi. Yeah. The book of Ruth is about Naomi. It should be called Naomi, but it's called Ruth instead. And that's okay. She is one of the good guys. But ultimately, the book is about an elderly woman named Naomi. From the very beginning to the very end, she's the primary character in the book. And Naomi is an Israelite, a Hebrew. This would have been before the term Jewish was coined, but we would see her as Jewish. Whereas Ruth is a Moabite. She's not from Israel. She grew up in a family that would have worshiped a different God altogether and had different customs. But the story of Ruth starts out in chapter 1, verse 1, and we learn that there's a woman named Naomi who's married to a man named Elimelech. Now, they both live in a town that's become very famous, especially at this time of year. Anyone know the name of the town they live in? Bethlehem. Yeah, Bethlehem. So they live in Bethlehem, which literally means in Hebrew, the house of bread. And what's ironic about that is in the opening chapter of Ruth, there's a famine in the land of Israel. So there's no bread in the house of bread. So the house of bread is breadless. And so in those days, you couldn't just go to the supermarket. You couldn't go to Fry's or Safeway and just pick up some bread or food. If there was a famine in the land, that means there's no food where you are. So Elimelech and his wife Naomi, they moved to a land called Moab, which is a neighboring country. And so they were immigrants in a country that was not their own. So they left and went to a place where there was plenty of food, plenty of bread, and they stayed there. And at some point, either before they left or after they got there, Naomi gave birth to 2 sons, Machlon and Kilion. And that's good. because sons take care of you in your old age. So they had a couple of sons, and they grew up anyway in Moab. And because there weren't many Israelites there, they married Moabite women. They married a woman named Orpah and a woman named Ruth. Orpah, by the way, is the namesake for Oprah. Her mom just spelled it wrong. But Orpah and Ruth were the two Moabite women these guys married. And it all looks really good, right? Because if they have kids, you know, the line of Elimelech continues, and eventually somebody will be able to take care of Elimelech and Naomi in their old age. But the problem is Elimelech dies. And then Machlon dies. And Chilion dies. And so when Naomi left Bethlehem, her belly was empty, but her womb was full. And now she finds out that the famine is gone. There's bread in the house of bread. And she decides to go back home and die around family. And she leaves, and her belly is now full, and her womb is empty. And so she goes to the highway to say goodbye to her daughters-in-law, Orpah and Ruth, to say goodbye. This is it. You know, this is where they're from. This is where their family lives. This is their religion, their language. This is where they're from. And Naomi is all alone now. And so she goes to the highway to say goodbye to them. She has all of her stuff, you know, packed. And it's just this, you know, tearful goodbye. And she says, I love you. Go get married, find new husbands, have kids. I hope you guys have a great life. I love you. I'm so glad our lives intersected. And they said, oh, let us go with you. But that's just a polite thing that people say. It's kind of like if somebody stayed at your house for a week and they say, we got to go now. And you're like, oh, stay. You know, you don't really mean it. If they decided to stay, you would be petrified. You'd be so disappointed. You'd be like, oh, it's no problem, really. But you don't really mean it. It's just polite. You're supposed to say, oh, you stay longer. And they go, no, we really have to go. And you're like, okay. So that's what happened. And Orpah says, we'll go with you. You know, it's like, we'll go with you. And she's like, gals, you can't go with me. I have nothing for you. I'm broke. I'm old. My husband's gone. My sons are gone. If I were to get married tomorrow and have a baby the next day, would you wait for him to grow up and get married to him? I mean, let's be honest. I'm done. It's over. This is goodbye. And so Orpah kisses her mother-in-law and goes back home. And Ruth just stands there. So now it's really awkward. Because Naomi's like, bye-bye. And Ruth's like, I'm not going anywhere. And Naomi's like, look, don't be polite. Just go home. And then she says something that changes the trajectory of all of Israel. And the one thing we learn about Ruth from the way she responds is this, and I want you to write this down, that true love, which is what we see here in the book of Ruth, from Ruth, true love involves unselfish, Christ-like loyalty to those at risk. True love involves unselfish, we unpacked that last week, unselfish, Christ-like loyalty to those at risk. And we're going to unpack loyalty today in a way that may not be like you've always thought about loyalty. True loyalty is to those God is loyal to. True loyalty is to those who are vulnerable and to those who are at risk. So here's how Ruth responded on the road in chapter 1, verse 16. She said, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Just stop talking. Where you go, I will go. And where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. And your God, my God. Where you die, I die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely. So help me, God, if even death separates you and me. Who does that? Right? This young Moabite widow owes elderly Naomi nothing. She doesn't owe her anything. And yet she looks at this woman and sees a woman who is about to take all of her bags and get on the highway and travel to another country all by herself. Talk about being at risk. Ruth couldn't do it. Ruth couldn't just say goodbye to this woman she had called mom. She could just wave goodbye and say, hey, take care, you know. Hope bad things don't happen to you on the road. Hey, don't get robbed. She went. She said, I'm going too. I know I have to change my faith. I know I have to change my family. I know I have to get used to some new people and a new language, but I don't care. I'm choosing to not leave you alone. This is what happened. Orpah did what was ordinary and expected. We don't blame Orpah for what she did. That's what people do. But it was a contrast between her and Ruth. Ruth did what was extraordinary. She did what was unexpected. Naomi had nothing to offer Ruth, but Ruth was loyal anyway. So she goes, and she starts taking care of Naomi. She probably, when she went out into the fields in chapter 2 to glean, it was like getting a part-time job, or a full-time job. I mean, think about it. She's like a single mom who moves to a new town and goes get a job to provide for herself and her former mother-in-law, to whom she owes nothing. And she works every day and she takes care of her. And she comes back from the fields and she has all this stuff, because she's gleaning in the fields. She's been taking all the extra stuff that the harvesters left behind. And the guy that was there, that the owner of the field, gave her a whole bunch of extra stuff. And he said to his men, don't harass her. And so she comes home and she has all this food. And Naomi's like, where did you get that stuff? What field were you in? Oh, this nice little field right down here. You take a right, you go down here, it's a nice field. Nice people. Nice man. Owner's a nice man. Well, who was he? Well, he said his name was Boaz. And she's like, Boaz. It's like, dun, dun, dun. Well, he's a special dude. And she's like, really? How special? Well, he's like the closest kinsman, I think, to my late husband Elimelech, which means he's a guardian redeemer. And Ruth's like, really? What's a guardian redeemer? And Naomi's like, he has the power to buy back the property we sold when we were poor and bring it back into the family. He's the one by which, if I or say you have a kid with him, would be reckoned as my son's kid and bring the family name back, and we would not die in shame. He could take care of us. And Ruth's like, wow, that's cool. And Naomi says, well, here's what's going to have to happen. You're going to have to propose to him. It's really weird, right? This young immigrant girl is going to propose to a wealthy businessman, property owner. Go bath this week, okay? Take your bath, put on your best clothes, rub some flowers all over you, get gussied up. And here's what we're going to do. You're going to sneak down to the threshing floor, because the men tonight are going to be at the threshing floor threshing all of their grains. And I want you to watch. They're going to drink heavily. They're going to party hard. And at some point, they're going to pass out. And so I want you to watch where Boaz goes to sleep. And then when all the men are asleep, and it won't take long, just sneak over there and, get under the covers with him. Which she's going to do. She says, I will do whatever you say, Ruth answered. So she went down to the threshing floor and did everything her mother-in-law told her to do. So she does that. And literally, it says that she got under the covers near his feet, which that's the translation in English because it's the correct translation. But in Hebrew, that's also a euphemism for genitals. So it's not really clear where she was, she was getting under the covers, but like the author intentionally leaves it vague. What is happening? I mentioned last week that most of the women in the genealogy of Jesus aren't even Israelites. And almost all of them have some kind of sexual scandal associated with them, whether it's deserved or undeserved. It's probably undeserved with Ruth, but the author leaves everything vague on purpose to make you go, what are they doing? What is she doing? Like, oh no, is this going to end well? Like, is this going to end well? And so she slips under the covers, and at some point, Boaz wakes up. And he notices as he's kicking around, under his covers, he notices there's a human being in the covers with him. And he's like, who is that? And keep it in this dark, right? And a voice says, oh, it's Ruth. Remember me? Okay, he remembers her. And it's weird. And then she says this, spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family. Okay, so spread your garment over me also means to spread your wing over me. It's literally a metaphor for a marriage proposal. So she proposes right there on the threshing floor with all the other people lying around in the middle of the night while he's been drinking. She proposes to him. And he understands exactly what she's saying. she's like, will you marry me? It's a really odd proposal, I have to admit. It's very odd. But she says, will you marry me? And then he says, the Lord bless you, my daughter. This kindness is greater than that which you showed earlier. You have not run after the younger men, whether rich or poor. So here's what is happening. Ruth married to redeem and rescue and deliver her mother-in-law, who was broke, her late father-in-law, whose name was going to be wiped out, her late husband, rather than for passion or wealth. So she could have stayed back in Moab and married someone she went to high school with, right? Her high school boyfriend. She could have gone back to that. Or she could have just gone to Bethlehem but found another young man her own age. Or she could have married somebody that had real money. But she didn't. And Boaz was shocked. He said, of all the men in this town and where you come from that you could propose to, you proposed to me, and it's obvious that you did so for one reason. You really love Naomi. And I thought what you did for Naomi by moving here with her was like the biggest sacrifice I've ever seen, but clearly, this is a bigger one. You're marrying me because I'm the only one that can take care of Naomi. This is wild stuff. This is what real love looks like. This is real loyalty. We don't understand loyalty in our culture. We define loyalty so many different ways. We think loyalty is defending the people around us in our family or friend circles, no matter what they do. Right? That's not real loyalty. That's not good loyalty. That's not Christ-like loyalty. Or we think loyalty is to protect people from the consequences of their own choices, to protect them no matter what, from anyone else or for accusations or from consequences. That's not Christ-like, unselfish loyalty at all. Let me explain what loyalty looks like. I had a friend years ago that told me something. He said, he called me up and said, hey, David, I need to tell you something. I said, what? He said, I just found out that one of my kids took advantage of another one of my kids, and I'm devastated. I said, what did you do? He said, what could I do, David? I picked up the phone and I called the police on my kid. He called the police on his own kid. And I said, God bless you. Because almost nobody ever does that. They protect the abuser instead. And I said, why was that your instinct, if you don't mind me asking? And he said, well, because I've got more than one kid who's been taken advantage of. And there are other people that may be taken advantage of. And I don't know who's at risk. But I know this, I have an obligation to protect the vulnerable. And I just thought, wow. 9 times out of 10, I don't see that. I see a twisted, perverted kind of loyalty that says, let's gather the wagons, surround our own, and make sure no one outside comes in and does us harm. And he said, I have to protect the weak. That's beautiful. That's what Ruth did. That's true love. True love is an unselfish, Christ-like loyalty that costs us something to protect those at risk. And that's what God invites us to do this Advent, is to love like Ruth. And if we do, we're going to get rewards like Ruth. And we'll cover that in just a moment. We're going to take a quick 3-minute intermission. If you're at home, do what you want. If you're here, there are drinks back here, restrooms to my right, and we'll be back in 3 minutes to finish the story. All right. Go ahead and be seated. So, Ruth shows us what real love looks like. Unselfish, undivided loyalty for people who are vulnerable. And we also see from the story of Ruth what happens, what God does for people like that. And you can write this down. God honors that. He honors unselfish, Christ-like loyalty with rewards you and I cannot possibly manufacture. It is not possible for you to design a future for yourself that resembles the future God has for you. You and I work so hard to make things work for us. Often we fail completely, miserably. Sometimes we succeed. But even when we succeed, that future is nothing like the future God has for us, which is always better than we could ever imagine. Go back to the story for a moment. So Ruth's out gleaning in the field, and Boaz comes along to check on his employees, and he sees this young woman he doesn't recognize, and it's a small town. So, I mean, everybody knows everybody, except who's that? And they say, oh, that's that Moabite gal that came back with Naomi from Moab. And he's like, oh, so he already knows, right? You know, there's no TV, there are no movies. This is what, you know, this is the hot goss, right? This is what everybody knows. They've been talking about this for weeks. And he's like, ah, that gal. Ruth 2, verse 11. So Boaz replied, I've been told all you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, how you left your father and mother in your homeland and came to live with a people you did not know before. I know all about you. May the Lord repay you for what you have done. May you be richly rewarded by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge. Boaz says, you have honored one of God's own, Naomi, my relative. You have taken such good care of her. May the God of heaven, who's become your God, may he take as good a care of you as you've taken of Naomi. May God honor your sacrifice. And of course, God does. Then Ruth finds out who he is. She proposes. And he goes, wow, you really love your mother-in-law. And then he says this in chapter 3, near the end. He says, yeah, well, man, I wish I could. There's actually someone who's closer to Elimelech technically than I am. And he has the right to redeem the property and marry you ahead of me. Now, the marrying Ruth thing is like the levirate custom we looked at 2 weeks ago with Tamar. It's the idea that when there is a widow in Israel, the closest male relative is supposed to have children with her, marry her, have children with her, and that first child, the first one, the first son, is reckoned as a direct descendant of the deceased. And we looked at it with brothers with Tamar, but here it goes beyond just brothers, it's extended family. And so really it's not Ruth or her husband that's being redeemed, it's Naomi and her husband that would be redeemed. And so Boaz says, I wish I could, but there's a guy closer to me, and he has the right to do it first. And it's like, oh, no, not another dude. And he says, but you know what? I'll go check with him, and I'll find out tomorrow if he's willing to do this. And if he's not, I will. So we get to chapter 4, and so Boaz goes to this guy, and he says, you know, would you like to do this? Here's this plot of land. It belongs to the family of Naomi. Would you be willing to buy it back for Elimelech and his family? And of course, you get to harvest on it and use that property if you want. And he's like, heck yeah. And he's like, oh, by the way, there's also a young Moabite woman that came back with her. You would also have to marry her and have children with her to redeem Elimelech's family line. And he goes, oh, I see. Well, I mean, if you'd rather do it, I don't mind letting you. You know what? I volunteer to give up my rights if you really want to. I would say no. And Boaz goes, okay, well, sure, I'll do it. So then he comes back and he tells Ruth and Naomi, I'm going to do it. I'm going to buy back that land. I'm going to rescue the family. I'm going to marry Ruth. And then we find this verse. So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife. When he made love to her, the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. The women said to Naomi, because this will be reckoned as her son, not her grandson. This will be reckoned as her son. Praise be to the Lord who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. This is a reference to Boaz, but it's also a reference to this baby. May he, that is the child, become famous throughout Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. Wow, an old lady with a little baby. For your daughter-in-law who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, that super high praise, has given him birth. And they named him Obed. That's an interesting name, huh? He was the father of Jesse, the father of David, and ultimately the father of the Messiah. From this woman who was not even an Israelite, who was simply loyal. God took such incredibly good care of her. Listen to this. God provided a husband and home for Ruth, land and an heir for Elimelech long after his death, joy and a caregiver for Naomi. I mean, she's happy. She could be more excited. She's got someone to take care of her. You know, there was no Social Security, Medicare. This is the take care of old folks plan in Israel. And a Redeemer King for Israel. And a Messiah. Right? All of this because Ruth was loyal over and over again to Naomi. This is the way God took care of Naomi and Elimelech and Ruth. God's plans clearly far surpass our own, do they not? Ruth could not have manufactured an ending like this if she tried. But God can, because God's in the miracle business. God raises the dead. God can do whatever he wants. And so God takes care of those who take care of his own. Those who are loyal to the ones God looks out for, those at risk, those who are vulnerable, those who come alongside the God of heaven and take care of those God wants to take care of, God is loyal to them. God will find someone to pursue those at risk. God will find someone who is willing to hear his voice and go. God is looking for someone who will answer his call to defend the defenseless. And here's the neat thing. When you are willing to pay whatever price you have to pay to join God in taking care of those at risk, God has your back. And God is really good to those who are loyal to his little ones. I heard a story from someone a while back that I was doing soul care with, and she was telling me her story. And her story was a really horrible story. And when she was really young, she was taken advantage of by her stepfather. And it happened for years. It was a tragic story. It was just heartbreaking. And I said, well, did you ever say anything? And so years went by, and she said, finally, when I was a teenager, I finally told my mom what was happening. I said, then what happened? She said, my mom believed my stepfather, not me. Now, by the way, I was expecting that answer because that's normal. It's normal that in that kind of case, the mom takes the side of the stepfather, not necessarily because he's more believable, not because she really believes him to be the one telling the truth in her heart, but because the cost of choosing to believe your kid is much greater. And few people are willing to pay that price. So she chose to believe her husband. I said, what happened? She goes, I ended up in foster care for the rest of my childhood. I said, that's a terrible story. And so I listened to this story. It broke my heart. And I thought about all the young ladies that are in such vulnerable positions and young men that are in a position like that, and there's no one, there for them. And it reminded me of Nicole's story, our Nicole. Here's our family picture, the latest one. Nicole's the second from the right over there next to Nando. Nicole has a pretty rough story. I won't share her story. She can share it herself, but it's a pretty rough story. And then she ended up here at the Oasis. And she was 23 years old, and God put it on Hope's heart and my heart that we should take her in. We should adopt her, which, I don't even know how to we couldn't legally adopt a 23-year-old, so we didn't, but we illegally adopted her, brought her into our home, and she became our kid. And we didn't know what we were doing, but it's a really great ending to the story, and it's one I couldn't write. It's like 7 years later, and there's Nando and Jackson in the picture, and we're all a family, and it's awesome. It's an awesome story so far. And it's better than any one that we set out to write. We couldn't have written it that well. But God can. And I think about that gal that came to me, and I think about her story, and I think to myself, if that young lady gives her life to Jesus, I bet he has an ending better than I can think of. Like, I don't know what God wants to do in her life, but I know this. God has been there all along, and he's aware of every single thing that happened to her. He's aware of the pain of her childhood and her mom not believing her. Like, God knows all of that stuff. He is so close to those at risk and so close to those who are vulnerable. God is always watching. God is always caring over those who belong to him. And he is planning an ending better than we can ever imagine. And that ending is not just for the vulnerable, but it's for all of those who are loyal to God enough to be loyal to those God loves. And we can be a part of that story too. We just have to be willing to listen to Jesus. Now, I don't know what Jesus is inviting you into today. I don't know your situation, but here's what I do know. I know that God is inviting all of us, including you, to demonstrate this kind of Ruth-like, Christ-like, unselfish loyalty to those who are at risk and vulnerable and weak. Like my friend who picked up the phone and called the police. God is asking you to do something hard, and it's going to cost you something. And I'm not sure if God's asking you to take care of someone that lives in your home or someone who doesn't live in your home. Someone related to you. Maybe someone who's not related to you. Maybe someone really old. Maybe someone really young. I don't know whom God is inviting you to be loyal to. But I'm confident in this Advent season, he's asking us to look out for somebody. And he's wanting to find someone who's willing to listen and respond. Because so many people don't. Will you be the one to hear his voice? And step out and say, I will be loyal like that. It will cost you a lot. It cost Ruth her family. I mean, if her mom and dad were still alive, her brothers and sisters, her extended family, her cousins, she lost her family, her hometown. She had to go adopt a new religion, a new language. Like, she lost everything she had ever valued in life. She abandoned what she valued a lot like Rahab did. Last week, Rahab did the same thing. She abandoned everything for the God of Israel. So does Ruth. So does Ruth. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again because I think it really helps us understand what this looks like. Because again, we have so many depraved, distorted views of what loyalty looks like. I have a friend. I won't mention her name. Some of you know who she is, and some of you don't. If you don't, then she probably doesn't want you to know, so I won't tell her name. But anyway, a woman who has more than one kid, and so one of her sons years ago was off to college, and he was back east in college, thousands of miles away, and he came home for spring break. So he drove all the way from the east coast to here. And he got home and, they hugged and all that kind of stuff. And then one of her kids comes up to her and refers to her son who just came back and said, he's been drinking, right? I smell it on his breath. So, he had just gotten back in from driving, So she said, where's the rest of it? And he goes, the rest of what? She goes, the alcohol. Where's the rest of the alcohol? He's like, it's in the car. She goes, give me the keys. So he gave her the keys to the family car. She went out there, found the rest of the alcohol, poured it out. So a week goes by. It's time to go back to school. And he comes up to his mom. And he says, Mom, where are the keys? She goes, what keys? And he goes, the keys to the car. She goes, I'm not giving you the keys to my car. He goes, why? She goes, I don't let people who drink drive my car. Are you out of your mind? No, you're not getting my keys. I'm not a fool. And he says, well, how am I going to get back to college? She goes, I don't really know. But it's not my problem. It's yours. So figure it out. And that was that. And I love that because that is gutsy parenting. That's good parenting, guys. That's what it looks like. I'm not getting to my like probably way quickly. Like, whose problem was that? Whose problem was it? It was his problem. Do you let your kids sleep in the bed they made? Especially adult kids. Do you let your children suffer the full consequences of their own stupidity? Do we love the people around us, or do we coddle them? Oh, I hate that. Guys, as a pastor, I hate that. Do not coddle people. Stop it. You know what real love looks like? Letting people fall down and figure it out themselves and backing away and let them and Jesus figure it out. Of course, you got to trust Jesus. And if you don't trust Jesus, you're never going to do that. But if you really believe Jesus loves your kid more than you, you can just step back, pull the rug out from under them and go, figure it out. I'm sorry. I'm not going to make this landing soft because I love you too much. Real love isn't the kind of loyalty that coddles. Real love's the kind of love that says, I'm going to protect people from you. And I'm going to protect the person I long for you to become. Therefore, I'm going to let you suffer for your own foolish choices. I don't know what kind of loyalty God's calling you into, but I know this, it's going to cost you something. It's going to be hard. It's not necessarily going to feel like love in the moment. It's not going to give you the warm fuzzies. But I don't think it gave Ruth warm fuzzies either. But in the end, it's always worth it. Always. Because God's plans are way better than yours. Let's pray. Father, give us courage to love like you love, to take risks, to look out for the people that no one else seems to look out for, to care about those at risk and vulnerable like Naomi. Father, help us to love like you, to have a fierce loyalty for those you are loyal to, and to love like Jesus. Father, that's going to require an unselfishness and courage that we only have through Jesus, but I pray that you would give us that kind of courage. Help us to be strong, to be faithful, to be consistent, and to be loyal like Jesus. Because we know you take good care of those who take good care of those you love. And we pray this in Jesus' name and for his glory. Amen.